Welcome, my name is Kelly.
My name's Jamie.
And this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. And today we're talking about Blue Sky Studios' Ice Age.
Ice Age.
I am super excited to talk about Ice Age. It was a classic family film growing up for me.
It's true, yeah.
And this topic was voted on by the patrons over at patreon.com/Fanimated. So Thank you to the wonderful Fanimated crew over there for voting on this Blue Sky Studios production. We had a few different Blue Sky Studios films up in the poll, and this won by an overwhelming amount. So,
oh my goodness.
Everyone likes Ice Age.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely check out patreon.com/Fanimated if you want to vote for upcoming episodes as well. And the reason why I decided to do something from Blue Sky Studios is that it recently closed. Disney closed the studio.
Oh.
So
I actually didn't know that.
yeah.
Whoa.
We're not getting any more Blue Sky Studios films. So that's always a bit of a bummer.
I don't think I even knew that Disney owned them. That's how behind I am on animation news. Whoops.
I mean, I would just assume that Disney owns everything.
Yeah, you know what? That is a fair assumption. Yeah.
But for Disney owning it, you cannot find Ice Age on Disney Plus right now, which is a crime.
Weird. Okay.
But you know, they're working on it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But regardless, I wanted to make sure we talk about a Blue Sky Studios film because we haven't yet on the podcast. And so what better film than their first
the one that started it all. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, however many sequels later, it's this huge franchise. Oh, man. So very excited to talk about Ice Age. What's your history with this film? Was this a childhood classic for you?
Yeah, I would say yes for the most part, because I remember watching it at least a few times as a kid, at least 3 or 4 for sure, and I remember thinking it was great at the time. I don't think I watched it in the years since then, so I saw it a lot when I was probably 10 or younger, and then we skip a solid 17 years, and just this week I watched it again. So there was a long gap of time where it was not in my brain at all. And was oh, that's right, I do remember this. I do remember very random specific things. I'm sure we'll get into that later. But it's a childhood movie and then a blank slate for a long time. And now I'm back. Now I'm at Ice Age once again. So
it's a circle. It's always coming back.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's awesome. I would say my history with the film is similar. It was really, I mean, it's been a long time, since I've watched it. So watching it again to talk about it was just huge tsunami of nostalgia feelings. But yeah, we had the VHS at home, and that was definitely one. One of the ones that my parents also thought was funny, so it was often one that to be put in. So we watched this a lot, and honestly, I didn't realize how much until I did rewatch it, and I was I could quote all the lines. I was like, whoa, what? We've touched some unknown hidden memory bank in the depths of my mind.
There's a nerve cell that just lights up like a light bulb. Yeah. Wait a minute, this has been here the whole time. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So definitely watched it a lot as a kid, and we didn't. Just been a long time since I've seen it, and even the sequels, I think I've seen at least one of the sequels, but I honestly couldn't tell you.
Don't know which one. Yeah.
And I'm there are what, 4 or
there are
5?
Yes, I think there's 5 total.
Yeah, there are 4 sequels. 5
Right.
Ice Age films. That is a lot. What even happens in that many sequels?
I do remember seeing the second one in theaters. And the second one, I could be totally wrong, but I think the second one is called The Meltdown. And their whole thing is that all the ice is melting, right? So I super vaguely remember a little bit, but not much. I mostly just remember there's a bunch of vultures who sing Food from the Oliver musical.
Yes!
It's so strange. It is just a fever dream. And then I have no experience with any of the other sequels. The dinosaur one, the pirate one. And this is a very dumb story, but I'll tell it quick. I was in a theater with friends, a completely different movie, and a trailer started, and I think Scrat was in the trailer, so we immediately knew it's an Ice Age trailer, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, because I thought I was being funny, these Ice Age movies are so ridiculous. Like the last one was about pirates. Eventually, they're just going to have one of them set in space. And the trailer continues, and it's about space. I mean, it's about meteors, so I guess that's not exactly true. But I think they go to space at one point. I think there's like helmets.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
That is the ridiculous fun energy that is coming from this franchise.
Right,
it's
right.
Just like we're gonna do whatever we want to.
That's a good way to put it. They do have that. What's like? Why not? Like that's their whole like what's stopping us? Yeah.
Oh man, that is hilarious. You hit the nail right on the head there.
Yeah, I wasn't proud of it though. It didn't leave me feeling proud, like good about myself. I was just kind of like, oh man.
Oh no, it is in space.
Yeah, I feel like the fool in this situation.
Oh man. Yeah, I definitely remember the second one. Now that you mentioned the vultures,
right.
That is definitely a pretty iconic scene.
I think the second one might have that little guy with like the eye patch.
The little like,
I want to say he might have been Scottish, but I could be wrong. He definitely had.
It's not a squirrel. It's like it looks like an otter, kind of.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a ferret or like a stoat or something, but one of those sorts of animals. He definitely had very. He had the energy of like this character is immediately everyone's favorite, you know.
Aren't there twins though? Aren't there 2 of them?
Oh my gosh. Now I don't know. Maybe.
Well, regardless.
Can I take like a 30-second break from recording anything helpful to just look stuff up on my phone because now I want to know.
Yeah.
Ice Age characters. Just hang tight, everybody. This'll we'll be back on track in a second.
And granted, we know that we're not talking about the sequels in this episode, but
right. That does make me feel a little better, yeah.
So we did not do our research on the sequels.
No, not at all. Oh, okay. We're thinking of 2 different things.
Oh, okay.
In one of the movies, there's a character named Buck who has a leaf covering his eye and like this little knife. But in one of the other ones, there are these twins. I can't find their names or what movie they're from, but they look a bit familiar. Maybe they're from the dinosaur one.
Are you saying that I have seen more sequels than I thought I had seen?
It's entirely possible.
Because I remember
me too, though.
The twins.
Because maybe they're from the same movie.
We are just running down this rabbit hole, and I'm loving it.
Ice Age characters twins. It immediately popped up. Crash and Eddie are opossums. They appear in the Meltdown. Okay, now I'm going to look up Ice Age characters eye patch. Let's see what happens. He's a British weasel.
British.
Whoa, maybe I have seen the third one. I just saw the words underground dinosaur world, and suddenly a lot just came rushing back.
That's amazing.
It's like a journey to the center of the earth type thing where they find a secret, flourishing dinosaur biome underground, right?
Wow.
Maybe? Possibly, I'm not sure.
You would know more than me because I certainly have never seen it. I've only seen the first two. That's for sure.
Everything coming into my mind is like, yeah, that's a thing, and I say it, and then immediately I'm like, is it though? I'm not sure if that's correct.
I love that I'm witnessing the like unearthing of these like deeply submerged memories that you have about Ice Age.
Yeah, I must have seen it once, and that's probably all. The second one maybe I saw twice because I remember it a bit more clearly. Yeah. Gal.
And you know what? Now that I'm looking at this list of Ice Age films, there is one called Ice Age: Adventures of Buck Wild that was supposed so just about Buck probably. Supposedly supposing to be released 2022. But
oh my goodness. Okay.
I doubt that that's happening now because the studio is closed.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Which would kind of be disappointing. I mean, you know what? It probably was just kind of scrapped because I don't.
That is too bad.
That is too bad. But
it's voiced by Simon Pegg. What? I didn't know that.
Buck?
Yeah. Wait, unless I looked at the wrong part of this page.
I clearly need to go back and watch these sequels.
Right? No, it's Simon Pegg, the guy from Shaun of the Dead. That's so wild.
Wow.
I mean, he's much more famous than just that movie, but... Okay, sorry that tangent took so long.
These are the tangents that I live for.
Right.
But, you know, going back to the roots...
Right.
The essence of Ice Age. I mean, all of these sequels were able to happen because the original Ice Age exists and was really well received.
And it really did do well, which was kind of surprising to me when I Googled it. Like, I didn't realize it was such a success. Like, I knew I had heard of it, and we got it on DVD or VHS or whatever it was at the time. I had no idea it made that much money, though. Like, and people were giving it pretty great reviews and stuff too. That was pretty surprising.
Yeah, like it was definitely well received. It's interesting looking at films where you were a child, so you were like, "Oh, this is great," but you would say that about everything, and then oh,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's that cool thing of looking back and being like, "Oh no, people liked this." Like, it wasn't just me being a kid. It was like this actually is a good movie.
Right, that's what I had thought it was, and then it turns out no, that adults liked it at the time as well. Yeah, kinda caught me off guard.
So basic synopsis, you know, the spoiler alert right now, like if you have not seen Ice Age, like turn back now. But Ice Age, of course, happens, you know, during the time of mammoths and saber-toothed tigers.
Yeah.
And we follow, you know, this very unlikely group of animals.
Yep.
A mammoth, Manny, a sloth named Sid, and a saber-toothed tiger named Diego. And they are all trying to get this human baby, back to his, you know, human herd.
Right.
So it's kind of just like a buddy type, you know, like travel across country road trip to bring the baby back kind of.
It is a road trip movie.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. So, you know, obviously Diego, being the saber-toothed tiger, has the hidden agenda of wanting to, you know, take the baby to his pack and eat the baby.
Right.
And of course, you know, changes for the better along the way. And of course, you know, it's just what makes this movie great are these three characters and their very strong personalities.
Oh, definitely. That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah. So to start off just talking about these characters, which one is your favorite and why?
That's a good question. Probably I think Diego might be the most interesting, but I think I liked the character of Manfred the most. I think like, I don't know. I just like what they did with story-wise. I think they did some interesting stuff with that. And I love how they introduced him, which is the very first scene he's in. You see these giant herds of animals. They're all migrating south because the ice is coming, right? And he's the only one walking the other way. And in the distance, a couple of people are like, "Hey, what are you doing? Watch where you're going." But also a couple of people are saying, like, "You're gonna die. Like, what is wrong with you?" And you're immediately intrigued. You want to know what's going on with this guy, right? And I think that's just a really stellar way of getting you to be at least a little bit interested in who is this character, what's his deal, what's going on. And I think that really carried over through the whole movie for me, because like Sid is like, he's fun and he's a goof, and he's not like a bad character or anything, but you kind of get exactly what you expect when you hear his voice. Like,
valid.
yeah. I think for me, I thought Manny was pretty fascinating to keep an eye on. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, Manfred is like the reasonable one, I would say, of the group. Can keep a level head. Definitely saves their little pack in multiple ways. Just by keeping a level head and being a good leader. But he also is, I would agree, just kind of the most interesting, especially when looking at, like, you know, throughout the film, you slowly uncover like his backstory, and that he had a family, and then they were killed by humans, which adds the lovely layer, you know, on to this journey that he's going on to save a human when they're the reason that his own family is dead. So that's a really sweet little, you know, little twist in the heart right there.
I think those couple moments may have been the strongest part of the whole movie for me. Like during the funnier scenes and the montages and stuff, like I'm not exactly saying there's anything wrong with it. I just wasn't as necessarily intrigued by it. But there are a couple of very quiet moments where there's not even any talking. The one that pops to mind for sure is when he's looking at the cave paintings on the wall, and they sort of come to life a little bit as he's remembering his family and stuff. And no one is saying anything. There's just the music, and there's just the moving paintings on the wall. And I really strongly felt like this is maybe my favorite moment of the whole movie. Like, and that comes through because he's been such a solid and, like, sort of reserved character until that point, who doesn't really talk about himself ever. Yeah, I was really impressed.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful moment, and definitely brings out the emotion for sure. And it's just so sweet because, you know, he kind of is taken out of his, like, trance by the baby being there, and it's just like, aw, such a cute moment.
He just awkwardly waddles into the scene, and it works. It for some reason it works, and you're just like, oh man,
right in the heart.
He hugs his little trunk.
Oh, so cute.
Not little. The kid is little, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, looking at the rest of the trio, Diego I find also really interesting, just because he obviously has the most character development.
Yeah.
Being, you know, part of this saber-toothed tiger pack who want revenge on the humans for, you know, killing their kind.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, eventually siding with Manny and Sid because Manny almost died trying to save Diego. So it's like this turn of like, oh, well, you know, throughout the movie, you see the Tigers pack, like, really, just pushing Diego around, really. And, like, it's a very, like, you know, if you don't do this, you'll get eaten, you know, like.
Yeah, they do threaten that. Yeah, they're pretty upfront about it.
And then here he is, and he, you know, finds this other, group. It's a very much like a found family sort of story for Diego, that he chooses, this is the family I actually want. And it's just very sweet.
It's like that particular dynamic is interesting. Like the other weird thing that's thrown on top of that is like partway through he kind of has to awkwardly change his plans, and he's like, all right, I can't get the baby away from the mammoth, right? So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to tell them that, oh, we're all going to find the humans, right? And even though what he's actually doing is bringing the baby to the rest of his pack, which has the weird added effect of like, okay, I'm also bringing a mammoth to the pack. And the other tigers are like, oh, this is great. We're going to eat him. Like, it's going to be difficult because he's huge, but we're going to gang up on him and bring him down and eat him, right? And, like, him changing his plans to include bringing the mammoth along with them is, like, weirdly what propels the rest of the plot forward.
Yeah.
So now suddenly he's traveling alongside these two weirdos, and as he becomes more and more endeared to them, and like the scene where Manny actually saves his life, and he's realizing like, oh, this is the person I was leading to be killed, and like it's just like you said, it's such a huge moment of him reevaluating which people he actually wants to be in, like they keep using the word in a herd, right? Mm-hmm. Like, who does he actually want to be in a herd with, and who does he want to reject, which has to be completely flipped around from where he was at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's Sid.
Yeah. God. There's Sid the Sloth.
The comic relief character.
I think I can do a decent job of being, let's say, objective. and I really do want to try to be careful, because there's such a big difference between this is not as good, like this is a bad thing. Like, there's such a big difference between that and this is just something that maybe isn't my favorite, Like, and a lot of other people love Sid. A lot of people think he's hilarious, like his voice is memorable and funny. So even though it might not be the thing I find the most enjoyable in the movie, it was a lot of work, and people really loved it. And it did, I mean, like we said, it did super well, so it must have a ton of people who saw this movie and were like, yeah, Sid's the best, right?
Yeah.
And actually, while I'm on the subject, John Leguizamo, one thing I made sure to write down, because I don't want to forget it, and I don't want to come off as like, oh, I don't think this is very good. Like, I don't want to sound like that. Doing a character voice and keeping that up for an entire movie and making sure that you're still getting to different emotions and different situations is so difficult. And, like, that's shockingly impressive, right? So even if I'm watching this movie and I think, like, maybe that's not my favorite of all time, like, that's not super important, because I can still recognize that this is a really impressive performance. Like, that is not easy to do.
Absolutely. All of the voice acting.
It works very well for the character. I should have said this at the beginning. Sid is like this bumbling goofball sloth, and he gets into dumb situations, and he kind of just like bumbles into things without thinking about it, maybe. But also, he's got a heart of gold. He's that kind of character, Like, he's trying to do it's his idea, actually, to bring the baby back. And like, you gotta respect that. He's trying to do the right thing, and he doesn't want to actually hurt anybody. He wants to be friends with everybody, and that is pretty fun, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, he really is the catalyst for the whole film, because, Manny was going to leave the baby there, and then Diego would have gotten it, and then everyone would have gone their separate ways. But it's Sid who is like, well, we got to bring him back. We can't just leave him there,
Right.
So,
right. And it's not even for any, like, any gain or any goal or something. He's just like, no, that's just, we just gotta. That's the right thing to do. Like,
yeah. And it's funny because, like, he's this guy always being left behind. Like, his family, also is like purposefully like trying to ditch him. Like,
yeah, and they did. They absolutely did.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad, yeah.
It is sad. So he's trying to find his place as well in his found family. But that's, they're all just looking for their own family. And I will say this is definitely one of those cases where it's maybe because I loved it so much as a kid that I still like crack up and laugh out loud at some of the Sid's jokes. But I always thought the humor in this movie was hilarious. And I still rewatching it, and I was like, yeah, this movie is just funny. Like, it hits my funny bone. I don't know what that says about me, but like it's definitely it's the dynamic of all three of those characters for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah,
how they relate to each other. They're just a bunch of goofballs.
It's a really good setup for like creating situations in which they can have really funny things to say to each other. Like, I totally get that. That is 100%. Actually, there's one funny thing I kind of ran into when I was just reading info about this movie, which is that apparently a lot of the dialogue between those guys was improvised. Like, obviously not the main plot stuff, but I guess they just gave them kind of free reign in quite a few scenes to just like say dumb stuff. And it worked super well. Like, you wouldn't even notice. But I know it really made a lot of people crack up, and I do remember thinking it was hilarious. And yeah, no, come back to Sid in particular, like, I get it, is what I'm trying to say here. I think I get it. Like, it's, again, watching the movie now is a different experience from when I watched it as a kid, but also you can remember so many of the moments where, like, wow, I actually do remember that bit word for word. And, like, that did make me and my brothers laugh like idiots, like, for a long time. Like, oh, man, it's kind of wonderful to sort of remember that and think about it again.
You know what it makes me realize?
Yeah.
is if people have listened to our Frozen episodes, I can be really harsh on Olaf, but I think rewatching this movie and appreciating Sid for how I appreciated him as a kid makes me realize how Olaf really is important to the film of Frozen.
Interesting.
For the kids, because like I feel like Olaf and Sid have very similar vibes.
I think I could see that, yeah. So you're getting like a snapshot of how kids now, or kids 8 years ago, I suppose, are like seeing Olaf the way you did 10 years before that, when this movie came out in 2002, yeah.
Yeah, I think a little bit. Like, I have a little bit more appreciation for the silly comedic side character.
Yeah, okay.
Through Sid, so yeah, good old Sid. And obviously we've got another very great character, and that's the baby.
Just a little human baby walking around.
It's just, again, just this dynamic, this like weird tension of like these animals who partially want to eat each other, or like yes, whatever, right? and yet they're all trying to take care of this baby. Like, it's crying and they don't know what to do, and they're playing peekaboo, and they're getting it food and stuff. Like, it's just so fun.
There are three new dads trying to figure out how to take care of a baby, and none of them are any good at it, and it's very funny. Like,
yes,
that whole situation is gold. I'm a big fan. Good. Yeah.
And it's, we already talked about the most emotional scene, and that's the cave paintings, but yeah. I definitely would argue the, second and third are, when the baby gets dropped off with Manny, and also when the baby finally goes home, like goes with his dad. Like, those are both two really sad moments too, and I'm just like, this baby's been through a lot. Yeah. But seriously, just like thinking of the ending, especially, like, it's such a good ending. It's like, I
definitely got that feeling. Yeah,
so satisfying.
I was a big fan of how they wrapped it up. I I'm never sure if it's... I'm always a little reluctant, like, if I'm watching a movie that's mostly comedic, and then at the end they try to go for mostly emotion, and I'm like, I don't know if that's always a good idea, but they really pulled it off here. I think that worked super well, because you have the setup of the human dad being, like... He's terrified, right? He's like, is this mammoth about to try to kill me, and do I need to fight back? And to have that switch over to they actually do... bring out the baby and give it back to him, and everyone walks away happy, more or less, which is kind of surprising given how hostile all the other encounters have been.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, it really is a sweet moment. And again, no dialogue. It's just their facial expressions, it's just the actual plot that's happening, and there's the music, and yeah, it's very sweet.
It's very sweet. I definitely always appreciate the no dialogue scenes that can really tell a story without words.
I'm fascinated by their decision to have humans not talk. Like, humans never talk in the whole movie, and it's a very fun flip of what you expect. So from their perspective, the humans are this weird animal that they have to, like, try to figure out how to deal with and how to interact with and stuff, and that really worked well for the plot that we're going for.
Yeah, because, you as the audience, you are in the animal world, you are not in the human world. And Sid even says, like, humans can't talk, like,
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. But yeah, it works really well, because you still know what the humans are thinking and feeling, which is really fascinating, especially for such an early, CG animation film, to have for them to be able to express so much emotions, not only in the human characters, but also in the animals. Like, we, we really understand through their facial expressions and body language what they're thinking and feeling, which, was not easy to do, especially with the technology given to them. So
yeah, and it was so early. I mean, like, obviously there had been CG films before this, but like it's tough to picture it now because it's come such a long way since then. But like, at the time, it really was just in some ways there were some engines, to be more clear, if I'm trying to dip my toes in the well of vocabulary I don't totally understand. There were some aspects and some production ways of doing it that were just getting started, and like,
yes,
that's I think it's an important thing to keep in mind for me, so that even when I'm thinking, like, maybe this movie isn't the most, like, aesthetically beautiful to look at of CG movies, like, well, yeah, of course it wasn't. This is 2002. Like, this is one of the flagships of trying to make these CG movies into a real thing, and like, that, I think that's pretty impressive, honestly. I always try to keep that in mind when I'm thinking about it.
It's definitely a good thing to keep in mind, because it, from our perspective, it definitely is like a little jarring.
Yep.
Being it's so old. Was rewatching it like a little hard for you because of the visuals?
Yeah, probably a little bit. CG has a weird disadvantage because it seems to me that old hand-drawn animation from any era can still look fantastically good. CG, it's not really the case because it was such a brand new thing, and like, there really are limiters that are just purely based on technology. So in a weird way, it's like not their fault. But on the same, I think it's also fair to say, like, it's gonna make CG properties tougher to quote unquote look good as time goes on, because we've seen so many much more clear and much more polished examples just from the past 20 years, basically. So kind of getting over that and kind of getting over my own assumptions was a big part of it. But once I did that, once you do that, it really is an impressive feat, and there is still so much to marvel at, like even in the animation itself, like you said, especially for the characters and their expressions.
Yeah, you make an absolutely excellent point that I also wanted to bring up. Like, CG animation really does not age well.
Right.
And, even the stuff coming out now is going to look that way in 20 years too.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
and, you go back and watch like Snow White or, an older classic 2D animated film. And, it doesn't look the same clearly, but it still
Right.
looks better than going back and watching an old CG movie, which seems crazy.
It's just like a weird quirk of those artistic styles, I guess is a weird way to put it, but like it just doesn't have that specific problem. And in a way it's almost unfair, because then I feel like I'm judging a movie based on something 100% outside of their control when they were making it.
I mean, yeah, it kind of, it's like, just with anything, you're watching it again from the lens of the future, like having that, knowledge and experience that they didn't have making it,
Right. It's kind of tough to keep that in mind, and so you're able to like appreciate it a little more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that makes sense.
It's just something I keep thinking about. Like, is there some sort of benefit to trying to make more 2D films because they're going to age better? Or, obviously the Western animation, market is completely CG saturated. Like, if you're not making a CG movie, you aren't a top studio. Like, that's all the top studios want to do is CG. Because, technology is amazing and incredible, and you can do so much with it. And, we will continue to be able to do so much. Like, Into the Spider-Verse is probably, like, my favorite, more recent CG movie, just artistically with what they can achieve, right? And that film almost like completely destroyed their servers because they couldn't handle the computing power of what they needed to render that. But like, so it's always fascinating because I as an animation fan want to see more, want to see how far this technology goes and like how it can be utilized. I live and breathe for that. But there is that idea of like, oh yeah, you're gonna go look back at Into the Spider-Verse in 20 years and go, wow, that's old,
Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's something that's really interesting to think about. It, especially because like, at the time, like in 2002 when Ice Age was made, it was great. Like it was really peak technology. And people weren't, thinking of it as like in the same way we are. But because we've seen such amazing things and what technology can do now, it's like your expectations are higher.
Right. And you're kind of not even on purpose comparing it to like other things you've seen recently.
Yes.
Yeah. That's tricky for sure.
It definitely is tricky. And it's just it's an interesting phenomenon of this medium of CG animation in general and how it doesn't age well. I think like one of the biggest ways I see this a lot is like with video games.
Okay.
Because for me, I feel like there are some video games that do age well and some that don't. Like if I think of my childhood experience, I've gone back and played like Mario Kart Double Dash, and I'm like, wow, this is old. And then I can play like Wind Waker though, and I'm like, oh no, this still looks good. Like it's older, but like because of the style, it doesn't feel as odd, So then I wonder, like, you have all of these CG movies that usually try to make things look as realistic as possible because it's like, whoa, stunning, beautiful.
Right.
But is there more of, and I don't have an answer to this, and I don't think that, I think we need all sorts of different, expressions and artistic styles, but like,
Right,
is
right.
there like a little bit of a benefit when you create something that is a little more of a time-tested style in CG, you know?
Okay. As in like, as in purposely leaning something towards more stylistic and unique as instead of getting more and more realistic in the hopes that it will keep that style and uniqueness into the future? Kind of?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I feel like I just, point at any recent like Disney film, for example, like they usually, and to a very high standard and degree, like definitely not taking away from that, like even Raya and the Last Dragon, Frozen 2, like beautiful, stunning. It's like so realistic. So these, parts of these films, it's just like, whoa, wow, like really, wow.
Yeah.
Like I love it. I'm here for, I just cannot believe my eyes sometimes how real everything looks. But give it 10 years, 5 years even, you're going to look back and be like, oh, wow, that could have been so much better. But if trying to make things a little more stylistic and, maybe that's going to last longer or, not have as much of a jarring effect. I personally don't think that's the purpose. I definitely, my conclusion right now is like, I don't think you have to worry about how the future, is going to see your aesthetic, but it is an interesting thing to think about. I think like, just thinking about, just as we're talking about this, it's just really, really fascinating to me. And so I want to open this kind of question of just like, they work so hard on the CG animation, but it will deteriorate over time.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I think the reason I'm having trouble with trying to think of what to say is because I have heard different theories on where things are going to go from here from people who know much more about it than I do. So I'm summarizing badly, but like the interesting idea is like in terms of CG trying to get more and more quote unquote good looking, is there gonna be a plateau? Like, is that even possible? Because if there is, then this question changes a little bit. Because, like, there would be a certain point where you can't make it look more clear, You can't really make it look more, as close to realistic as you want, because we're there. And, like, I don't know if that's a real thing or not. I genuinely don't.
That is a fascinating thought, and my mind is reeling. Because here's the thing, is like, we think that everything is so clear and crisp and wonderful, but look at, like, when the TV was first invented, they thought that was crisp and clear and wonderful, and it's like, we're at 1080p,
you know,
like...
absolutely true.
Computing... living in this wild age that we live in, like, computing power just grows exponentially. So, of course, we're going to keep being able to make clearer and clearer and clearer images. Like, we think that this is peak. This is not peak. Like, it's just going to keep growing. And like, as far as that is concerned, like, I guess I don't know. Like, we're going to have... we didn't think we could fit an entire computer on in a 9x13, laptop, let alone a phone, what I mean?
Anything smaller than like a giant lab. Like, this is our computer, and it's like this mountain of boxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so technology just keeps increasing. And as long as technology in general does, and our ability to, create higher resolution,
for sure,
then we're going to continue to, develop our CGI technology to match that. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's crazy to think about, but yeah, I don't know if there is a plateau. I mean,
Right, right.
if anything, it gets to a point where it's, and even now we see that, I think, like we get to a point where it's so, it's such a high, intensity resolution or whatever it may be, that our human eyes can't even tell the difference.
Right, exactly. Like, that is part of the problem.
So I definitely think there is restriction, not necessarily in computing power, but in our human power.
Okay. Huh.
Like computing power will continue to increase, but our human ability to understand that computer growth is limited.
That could hit the plateau. Okay. I see. That's a good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
So I think that's where I stand on that for now. But it's crazy. It's this crazy stuff.
Right.
To think about. 3D animation is weird, and also great and really interesting. If anything, it's like looking back on this, it's like, yeah, it's just always fascinating to see, wow, look how far we've come. This is insane. There is one other thing I wanted to talk about animation-wise for this film specifically, and that's a little thing called ray tracing.
Hey, okay. That popped up when I was looking through just a little bit of info, and I don't know much about it, so I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. I am no expert, and this is going to be a probably bad explanation.
Okay.
But I'm going to try. So this was one of the first films, 3D animated films, to use ray tracing. The first was actually the Jimmy Neutron movie that came out a few months before this.
No, wait, I actually remember that. That's the weird thing, is that I remember that movie more clearly than I remembered Ice Age before this. So that really, I was not expecting you to say that.
Oh, yeah. But Ice Age is the second, so that's great. It's basically a rendering technique used for lighting in animation. And so it's an algorithm that's going to automatically adjust the lighting in a 3D space to react with the 3D objects that you've computed. Mm-hmm. So, instead of having to draw in specific shadows or reflections, it's doing this all, it's being generated through a computer.
Huh. Okay.
And what's different from ray tracing versus other, algorithms, I suppose, is ray tracing is, as the name suggests, tracing each individual ray of light, rather than per se like, certain tracing that's just going like a scan line, which is like row to row. And this is more pixel to pixel. So it's just more specific, I guess.
Jeez, yeah.
And this type of technology, has been around for a while. It's generally used in 3D animation for, like I said, shadows, reflections, refractions, scattering, translucence, any of those sort of lighting effects that can happen just naturally in the environment. So, because there's a lot happening in 3D animated films, and to go in and hand draw all of that would be pretty insane.
Yeah, and almost everything in this film is outdoors in the sun, except for like 2 or 3 big scenes, but almost everything else has sunlight all the time. So you'd have to factor that into where everyone's standing, and like where the light is hitting them, and where the shadows are falling, and like I had never even considered that before just now.
Yeah, there's a lot that's happening in a 3D environment to make it look natural.
Yeah.
And this is just one of the tools to create that natural environment. And another thing that I found out when I was researching this a little bit more, and didn't realize, is like, even though this technology has been around for a while, it's one of those things that like is only just starting to surface in video games, because it takes so long to render. Like the time it takes to render is pretty significant. So using it in something like a film, where they have time, to let that process, it is available, but
Right.
in a video game, they like it has to happen instantly
Huh.
because
Okay.
you're moving a character around, right? So they haven't been able to use that. And
Okay. We're talking about like in the game as it's being played, not
correct.
like as it's being made.
No,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
Because when you think about
Huh.
it, when you're in playing a video game, your character is interacting with 3D space.
Yeah.
And so the
Okay.
shadows, the reflections, anything happening in that environment needs to happen in time as you're moving the character.
Oh boy. Okay. So, okay, you just introduced the concept in my brain that a video game is visually a movie that is creating itself as you move it around. And that's
Yes.
the wildest thing I've ever thought of.
You're welcome.
Oh no. I have been playing video games for a long time, but I've never thought of it like that. Holy cow.
Animation is so cool, guys.
It kind of is. It's really amazing.
It's so amazing. Oh man.
Wow.
And so, speaking of computer power, like as technology develops, and video games can start using this technology as well, to actually render in real time. Again, it's not very many games that do this, and I think they're all like PC because I don't know about the new generation of consoles, what they can handle. But because I really don't follow video games as deeply as I know a lot of people do. But it's just, another one of those interesting things where here we are using it in Ice Age in 2002, but we don't have the computing power on our little, consoles yet to be able to keep up with that.
Yeah. That's pretty much the only aspect of it. That's as far as I know as well, is that for some reason PC can handle and can run more than consoles can, and I don't fully understand why, but people have tried to explain it to me, but
well, maybe I'll do some more research in that department next time we talk about a video game. But yeah, so that's general basics of ray tracing. If I got anything wrong in that explanation and there's someone out there who knows more than me, feel free to send me an email at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. But from my understanding, that's a very basic explanation of the lighting rendering technique of ray tracing.
Okay. Yeah, and you said that was pretty new when this came out, right? Like it was one of the first that had used it for a feature film? Okay, gotcha.
Yep. Yeah. So
cool.
So Ice Age is
innovative.
Innovative, yeah. Definitely. Also, just looking at like animation production stuff for this film, it was, like we said earlier, the first Blue Sky Studios film. And it was originally intended to be a 2D animated film for Fox Animation Studios with Don Bluth and Gary Goldman.
Wait a minute. Don Bluth? Mm-hmm. Okay. Really? Huh.
Yeah. So Don Bluth worked with Fox Animation Studios on Anastasia and Titan AE.
Yeah. Okay.
And, instead of, handing it over to them because they closed Fox Animation Studios after Titan AE, they instead had this newly created Blue Sky Studios for their first full-length feature in 3D. So that is pretty cool.
So I'm only asking about him because his name jumped out since I've heard of him before. Did he just leave the project then, or?
It doesn't seem like it seems like it was more pitched to them rather than taken on by them.
Gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's probably more of like from a producer standpoint, like, oh, we have this film idea, let's put it in this studio. But then, of course, that didn't work out, and they closed that studio and had Blue Sky Studios instead.
Interesting. Okay.
And it was, I think, when I think about the historical point of reference for this, I do not know if this is true, but this is just my speculation based on the time period. I'm going to guess that this was kind of, Fox Studios being kind of like, okay, we see that 3D animated films are doing well. let's ditch this 2D style and just focus on 3D animation because that's where the money is. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, how I picture it in my head. That might not be true at all. Obviously, I know Titan AE was not as successful, so that probably had a reason for Fox Animation Studios going under, closing at least,
Right.
But I think too, it was just like that was the times, studios are switching over to 3D versus 2D much more. So
I think it's fair to at least wonder, if not outright assume, that when they're trying to figure out their creative decisions, that the decidedly non-creative money aspect of it comes in a lot. I think that's probably a decent assumption.
Oh yeah. Animation studios are businesses just like any other business. They're gonna do what's gonna make a profit. Nobody wants to put a whole bunch of money into a film that isn't gonna return on that investment. So I like to give studios some flack for not taking the creative course, but honestly, if they didn't take the business course, then we wouldn't have more animation content to talk about. So I feel like there's got to be a good balance though of taking some risks and doing some more challenging, innovative things versus doing the safe bet. And I'm always a fan of the studio that's going to take the risk, take the challenge.
Well, hello, fellow travelers to the podcast airwaves. I'm Nathan.
I'm Jake.
I'm Jamie.
And oh, look what's this. Why, it's something we made I'd like to tell you about. It's Knight's Quest.
Knight's Quest is a fantasy RPG podcast where the three of us use dice and our imaginations to write a story together.
We're putting some wacky characters through whatever situations we can think of to tell an interesting story, and it's improvised, so we don't even know where it's going to go next.
Sometimes we buy socks. Sometimes we talk about bread. And sometimes we accidentally summon the god of chaos.
Just an average Friday here on Knight's Quest.
And with an original musical score for every episode, you won't want to miss anything that's happening in our story here at Knight's Quest, every other Friday, wherever podcasts can be found.
Yeah, we'll play some dodgeball and we'll get thrown in the dungeon by the king. It's fine. We'll do it all here on Knight's Quest.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with Ice Age?
Yeah. I stumbled on one... I didn't find a ton, but I did stumble on one interesting animation note, which was that the team took a lot of trips to the Natural History Museum
cool.
to like try to learn more and study more about how these particular species would actually move and walk and stuff. And I guess that made it that actually made it super difficult because they were like, this character is a gigantic towering mammoth who like doesn't have knees. How are we going to make him move and emote and, like, go in fight scenes and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, man.
So they had to get very, very, for lack of a better word, creative in trying to figure out how they were going to animate stuff, how they were going to have the character move. And obviously same thing with a giant sloth and a saber-toothed tiger. It looks like for Scrat they did that, but they also looked at, like, I mean, this is going to sound silly, but they looked at footage of squirrels. Like, they looked at real squirrels.
Scrat definitely is like a squirrel.
Yeah, and they were trying to really focus in on that weird jerky motion that he kind of does. God, Scrat, man.
We didn't even talk about Scrat. Let's talk about Scrat.
We can talk about Scrat, for sure. I did not realize that it's literally just a squirrel and rat, and the words are jammed together. I felt so foolish. That was like this morning. I just thought they chose a funny-sounding word. That didn't even occur to me.
It's wonderful. It's genius. I think Scrat's hilarious. Definitely adds to the comedic, relieving of the tension sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
And Scrat,
It's an interesting, like, I almost want to say framing device, even though he doesn't really have much to do with the story. But he's at the beginning, he's at the end, he's at a bunch of random spots in the middle. It just kind of, like, lines up the story, I guess. I'm not even sure how to
Yeah.
put it.
It's like a through line, I guess, maybe like a definitely bookends for sure.
Right,
Of just
right.
like, here are our little. It's almost like, throughout the story sequences, like there's all this drama and action and comedy happening throughout, and then Scrat shows up randomly to be like a little punctuation note point,
Right, right.
like there's little Scrat punctuation mark to tell us that we're like switching over to a new scene.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because when I was watching it, even just today, I was like, what is the purpose? What are we doing here? But like, I was having fun, so you know what? I guess that really should be my answer in itself. He just sort of shows up, man. He can't find a place to bury the acorn. He just can't do it. He's trying so hard, man.
He's trying so hard. Just give
Yeah.
Scrat a break. I wonder, and now I do need to watch the sequels, because I want to know, does Scrat ever achieve his lifelong goal of burying the acorn?
Right.
Do they
Or
ever give him that piece? Or is he forever tortured?
I think he's in the movies. That's not that's actually pretty obvious now that I think about it. I think he's a character that like interacts with people and becomes part of the story and stuff, but I don't know much more beyond that. And even at the end of this one, he upgrades his acorn for a giant coconut and accidentally destroys a tropical island. So
He can't catch a break. He just can't.
no, he's
He just
trying his
can't.
best.
Oh dear.
Real quick, Jack Black is in this movie.
What?
He's one of the tigers. He's
Really?
He's the really jittery one. I
yeah.
forget what name they get. Zeke. They called him Zeke.
That's Jack Black?
I didn't know that until now.
What?
It's Jack Black, and one of the other ones is Alan Tudyk, which was not what I was expecting at all.
No.
Like, they got some really famous people for these. I keep wanting to say lions, and every time I almost call them lions.
The saber-toothed
Oh,
tigers.
Yeah, saber-toothed tigers, yeah.
That's
No, that's not what I
brilliant.
was expecting at all.
No, me neither.
The last two things, I promise, super quick. John Leguizamo based his voice for Sid on the fact that he learned that giant sloths used to carry food around in the pockets of their cheeks, like in their mouths, like they would carry extra food, and sometimes it would ferment. So my
Wow.
extrapolation from that is that he heard that factoid and realized sloths can be drunk. And then he came up with the Sid voice.
Oh, I love that theory. That's great.
The very last thing is there's an interview that Dennis Leary is the voice of Diego, and he's been in a ton of other famous movies as well. He did an interview on Jay Leno where the original ending, Diego was going to stay dead. And they did it with test audiences, and the kids were crying, like they were bawling. And they were like, "No, you guys, we got to change this.
we gotta change it, man.
We got to change it. We got to change."
That would have just killed me.
Yeah, too sad.
That's way too sad. No, I'm sorry. That would have ruined my childhood.
Yeah.
So that's about all we have about Ice Age. Again, thank you so much to the patrons at patreon.com/fanimated for voting on this topic. Thank you everyone for listening. You can let us know what your thoughts are on Ice Age by emailing us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com or by messaging us on Instagram and Facebook at fanimatedpodcast. Don't forget to leave a rating and review telling us what we should be watching next. And thank you to everyone who supports the show. Our music is provided by Purple Planet Music. The art is done by myself. You can find me on Instagram at CandraDraw. And Jamie and I are going to go record a What You Watching episode for next week.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining me here, Jamie.
Of course. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. So we'll talk to you guys next week. And in the meantime, stay tuned.
And stay animated. I didn't realize you were waiting for me.
Perfection. I love it.
Yeah, good. Oh, just the Dodo Interlude
Oh,
Just
yes.
that entire sequence. Oh,
Gold.
my lord. It's one of the strangest things I've ever seen.
It's even stranger as an adult because I'm like, I always thought that was hilarious. You just got these dodos running around. And then you're realizing as an adult, like, oh, this is how they went extinct.
Yeah, which is especially dark because they're the only group in the movie that is like, no, you guys, the ice is going to kill everyone. We have to prepare so we can survive. And they're the only one that's just gone, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't understand. We have to go underground. And he's like, you have 3 melons.